difficult to read there, but I'll read it inshallah. والضاد حرف مستطيل يبلغ باستطالته إلى مخرج اللام ومن أجل ذلك أدغمت اللام في نحو قوله تعالى. Actually, I will avoid reading and translating the whole thing because we're probably short of time, but anybody who has an interest in reading the specific kind of description can come back to here. Right, so that's one. The reason why I put these things in there, as we will see later on, is there is like some difference, not difference of opinion, but some controversy surrounding the letter daad, right? So depending on where you are in the world, people might pronounce that letter a little bit differently. And also in terms of fiqh, right, as Samahat al-Mufti will inshallah be aware, there has been like a lot of discussion amongst the fuqaha about what happens if you pronounce your daad wrong, and will your salah be valid or not? Because commonly throughout history it's been like a matter of concern whether people are pronouncing the letter daad correctly or not. Okay, so that's why there's some academic references out there, but we're going to go with the description given in this book, right, which is a very common, famous book used in most Darul Ulooms by Maulana Ashraf Ali At-Tanwi rahmatullahi alayh, Jamal al-Quran. And you know, here are some, we might come back to this if necessary. These are the, you know, this is the mouth, and the teeth, the various names of the teeth, and then we have the tongue inside there too, and you know, the different parts of the tongue, and so on and so forth. We will come back and use that if and when needed. Right. In a nutshell, the makhraj of the letter daad, and I won't read and translate due to shortage of time, is if we imagine this is like, the tongue is like roughly this shape, yeah, right? So the letter daad is pronounced from hafatul lisan, or in Urdu zaban ki karwat, right? Which basically means the sides of the tongue, the sides of the tongue. So in all the books of tajweed, that's what it says. Daad is from the sides of the tongue, right? That's basically it. From the sides of the tongue, when they make contact with the molars, the back molars, yeah, adras al-ulya, right, the upper molars, right? So if we go back to this, what that basically means is, right, these are the adras here, right? Yeah, these, you know, they got different names, but altogether they are the adras. And this is the hafatul lisan, this is the side of the tongue, right? So when the side of the tongue makes contact with the roots of these teeth, right? So now imagine your mouth, you can feel around in your mouth with your tongue, your upper molars, the roots of them, the top of them, when the side of the tongue makes contact with those teeth. So there are quite a few teeth, not just a particular tooth. If you notice, most other letters, they have a much more precise makhraj with, so for example, dal and ta, dha, it's contacting one or two teeth, right? Whereas daad is contacting that whole region of teeth, all of those molars, okay? So on a very basic level, that is the makhraj, when your tongue just kind of, if that is the tongue and this is your upper mouth, your teeth and your gums, is basically your tongue just going like this. But that is easier said than done, right? A lot easier said than done, right? So another observation, if I was to ask you which is the closest sounding letter to the letter daad, what would you say? Just shout out something. Closest sounding, we'll put you on the spot, dal, right? So it is commonly perceived or believed or assumed that the closest sounding letter to daad is dal. But the ulama of tajweed have observed that that's actually not the case. The letter dha, ta, is actually closer in sound and more similar to the letter daad than the letter dal, right? And here are the reasons. Again, this is from Jamal al-Quran, I won't read and translate the whole thing, but anybody who's interested can read that. So basically, the author says that it's actually closer to the letter dha than it is to the letter dal. And then in the footnotes, there's an explanation for exactly why that is, but I'm going to explain that in English in a nutshell. This is a table, which is probably too small for you to read, but what it does is it lists each letter and which sifat that letter has. Right, the sifat are descriptors for the letters, right? And they are, because there's no letter that has the same makhraj as the letter daad. So you can't say, for example, dal and ta have the same makhraj, right? Tha and dal have the same makhraj. So you can say tha and dal are very similar because they're from the same makhraj. Ta and ta are very similar but daad, there's no other letter from the same makhraj. So how do you work out which letter is closest to it? So one method is by looking at the sifat. So I've got all these three zoomed in here, which might be easier to see. So what we have here is, let's get out of the way. If we have each of the letters, daad, da and dal, and which sifat they have inside them. So as you will see, right, daad and ba, and they're all similar in jahar, they all have jahar, but in shidda and rakhawa, basically this column here, there's a difference between dal and daad, but ba and daad are similar. So if you just kind of look through there, you'll see similarity there, similarity there, similarity there, similarity there. Whereas with dal, there's only similarity there, there's difference there, right? So from a sifat perspective, which is just an academic way of proving what is naturally observable with a keen ear, right? The letter daad and the letter da are very close together. It's good to know that to help us resist the urge to just make the daad a full mouth dal, right? Which is the easiest thing to do. Dal, daad, right? So you just say adda, adda. You just raise your tongue while you are pronouncing the letter dal, and you can end up with a sound which you can easily pass as the letter daad, right? But that is not strictly speaking correct, and that's what we want to get away from. Okay, right? Any questions on the basic makhraj of the letter, right? Or can we imagine exactly where that is going to be pronounced from? Okay, right. Now moving on, the difficult part is actually doing that. Why is it? Let's understand. So I'm going to give some tips on pronunciation. These are like my cumulative kind of tips that I've gathered across time. Inshallah, we'll find some more. There's one that I just added recently in here. So the first thing I think is important to understand, our tongues are not used to pronouncing this letter, right? Due to which we can't engage the sides of our tongue. If you think, there's no other letter where we actually use the side, we don't use the side of our tongue really to like eat either, yeah? Even if you were to pick something from your teeth, you probably use the tip of your tongue, right? So the sides of our tongue, we generally do not use them. So the first tip that I have, that I found,
may have something to do with our evolutionary process here.
Or maybe the opposite, because they once upon a time used to use the sides of their tongue to pronounce daad. So if you want to call it evolution, or if there's like negative evolution, then it might be negative evolution, right? Then that was a fatwa there, I think. Yeah. Right? So the first tip I would give is to exercise our tongues. I have found this accelerates vastly the process of becoming able to pronounce the letter daad well. What kind of tongue exercise? So this is a bit unconventional, right? This is not something you usually do in a tajweed lesson, but it's something I picked up from outside. Meaning they do these kind of things in language, speech and language therapy, in accent training, and in public speaking, right? To build muscle, to engage and strengthen the muscles on the sides of your tongue, that region, right? You can do this. What you do is you stick your tongue out pretty much as far as it can go, and then you imagine that you're trying to touch your ear with your tongue. Do it on one side, and you do it slowly, and you hold it there for about 3 seconds, and then you let it go, and then you do that 3 times over. Okay, right? So you can watch me, right? This is why this is not going on open public forum. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. right? And then you can do so either you can do 1, 2, 1 like that, or you can just do the same thing 3 times. Right, now as you're doing that, you're using the sides of your tongue to be able to do that. If you try that, you will see that the strain or the stress or whatever you want to call it, you will feel that on the sides of your tongue. So this will help strengthen the muscles on the sides of your tongue, which is what you need to do. Not only just to engage them, but to strengthen them. Okay, right. Other thing to bear in mind, daad you can pronounce from either side. Some people find it easier to pronounce from the right, some people find it easier to pronounce from the left. If this is the first time you're actively trying to strengthen the makhraj of the letter daad, I would suggest trying from both until you come to one that is clearly easier for you. Okay, right, is that clear? That's the first thing. Tongue exercises, I think they help a lot. Number 2, placing your hand. This is a good visual aid, right? Because in your mouth, sometimes we're not very conscious of what the various things inside our mouth are doing. So it helps to place your hand where you want the sound to come from. So basically the sound's coming from here. I do it from the right, just coincidentally. If you do it from the left, then you do, but something like this. So I find it helpful, and I found people find it helpful to place their hand here as a visual aid to say, okay, I'm going to try and make the side of my tongue actually hit my hand. Obviously your hand is outside, but Allah, yeah, that's like a practice aid. If you look in the mirror, it helps even more. Right, so you put your hand there. Allah is like a stabilizer, like a visual aid. Okay. Second tip. Third tip. Raise the back of your tongue, right? Before this, I'm going to just mention one more thing, because we won't have time to go through all the other academic details later. The main question, there's 2 main things that we need to engage the side of our tongue to touch the teeth or the roots of the teeth with good force. If it just floats around there, you'll end up with this Allah, Allah. You might have heard people pronouncing Wallah, Wallah. What kind of daad is that? Right? This is a common kind of criticism of people's daad, that it sounds like a ghain or something. Why is it coming out like that? Because either the tongue is not actually touching the teeth, or if it's just about touching, it's not touching with enough strength to pronounce the letter daad with jahar or with like strength, okay, or with volume, okay. Some people, right? So that's the first thing we need to do, is to make a strong contact, right? A reasonable contact between the side of the tongue and the teeth, right? That requires strength of the tongue, which that exercise will help with. The second common mistake in the letter daad is to pronounce it like a dal, right? To have the sifa of shidda inside it. Ad-da. Can you hear that d sound? That should not be in the letter daad. Allah, Allah. The letter daad has rakhawa in it, rikhwa, which means softness. So it's like a soft, it doesn't come to a hard bounce like dal and all the rest of the shidda letters have, right? How do you avoid that is the question. You make sure the front of your tongue does not touch your teeth or the gums, right? And this is probably the trickiest part. So say daad, Allah, you can say it quietly, Allah, right? And think, is the front of your tongue touching the teeth or the gums of the teeth? So it should not be Allah, Allah, right? If it does, that's where you will get this shidda sound from. If it touches Allah, Allah, can you hear that hard sound? That is a result of the tongue touching the gums of the front teeth like a dal, right? And it's not like a dal, as we saw from the makhraj and the makhraj and the sifat of the letter daad. Okay, right. Now the question is, how do you stop? Likelihood is if you tell 10 people to say the letter daad for the first time from the side of the tongue without touching the front, 9 of them will not be able to do it. It's just like, I can't, my tongue just touches, right? How do you avoid that? So there are a couple of tips for that. First and foremost, remember the letter daad has the sifa of isti'la and itbaq, which means it's full mouth, which means the back of the tongue will rise. Our tongues, when we raise the back, just like our hand, when we raise the back, the front automatically kind of retracts a little, it kind of curls in. And if we flatten our tongues, the tongue extends. Yeah, right? This is a natural phenomenon. So if we raise our tongues high enough, naturally the front of the tongue will retract a little bit. So we need to say Allah as full as possible, right? So in order to raise the back, in order to avoid touching the front, raise the back of the tongue as high as possible, right? Allah. So work on raising the tongue, and if you imagine your tongue, like this is the tongue, this is the roof or the side of the mouth. So instead of just going Allah, which is almost impossible to do without touching the back of the front teeth, say Allah, Allah. So your tongue has to be raised as high as possible, right? Not just a little bit raised, Allah, Allah, as high as possible, right? Last thing is retracting your tongue a little bit. What do I mean by retracting your tongue? I don't mean that you try to swallow your tongue and you unnaturally pull the tongue back and you speak like Mr. Bean and say, oh, like that, yeah? Okay? Right? If you try to do Mr. Bean the easiest way that I found, and perhaps this is what he does, is to try and pull your tongue back in. I don't mean doing that, right? What I mean is, look, if you've got a lazy tongue and your tongue is like sticking out, like daad, then it's going to like touch, every time you speak, it's going to touch your teeth, yeah? So you don't want that to happen. And our tongues are all different just based on how we speak, right? So if your tongue is like just kind of heavy or like sticks out a lot, right? Then you can like pull your tongue back a little bit, just keep the tongue back in the mouth a little bit. So instead of starting off like this, Allah, Allah, start off a bit like Allah, just pull your tongue a little bit, not so it distorts the sound. Question, you might say, this is takalluf, you're distorting your mouth. It's not takalluf. This is for some people whose natural oral posture or the natural kind of size or position of their tongue gets in the way. So this is remedial for like unusual or out of the ordinary kind of oral postures, okay? Right. So very brief recap for these four things. Exercise the tongue. I put that first because I found that's the most beneficial and quickest way to improve the letter daad. Place your hand there. This is in order basically of effectiveness, right? Place your hand where you should put it. Make sure you raise the back of the tongue as high as possible, and if necessary, if you feel that your tongue is just like filling your whole mouth up and there's no way of stopping it from touching the front, then see if you can retract your tongue a little bit, right? We have a few FAQs which we don't have time to go through, but I'm just going to leave them there just in case anybody wants to ask them because they thought of this, right? What is istitala? Istitala is a sifa which is unique to the letter daad. So there's often a bit of confusion. So what does that mean then? How does that affect the letter daad? It basically means that the letter daad, it has a large region from which the sound emanates from. Not like the other letters where it emanates from a small pinpoint, right? Will the tongue touch the front? As I've explained, no. However, you will find many explanations in more recent tajweed books where they say the tongue will touch the front of the mouth, right? So what we have there is a picture. They call this mawdi'u ilsaq or something like that, and they call the front mawdi'u talamus. It will just touch at the front. But in all honesty, from the background that I come from and the teachers that we have studied from, they believe this to be an error, a slight error, because this is not in the original books of tajweed, and it distorts the sound of the letter daad, right? But we can't go into detail with that. Let's carry on. Right, the next question, which is probably the most frequent one, is, but that's not how Arabs recite the letter daad. They just say daad, like a full mouth dal. So don't have time to go into this now, but in a nutshell, that is no proof in the world of tajweed that modern day Arabs pronounce it in a certain way. They pronounce jim as jim, some of them pronounce jim as gaf, and so on and so forth, but a lot of them, do you get what I'm saying? So that's not technically a proof. Is my salah okay? That's a fiqhi question which we will allow Samahat al-Mufti to answer. You can refer to him inshallah. And the last one, how much should I try? I will go to this one only, yeah? Our Ustad used to say, Maulana Imtiaz Sahib, Shaykh, you studied with him too, right? He used to say that you have to give daad 2 years. Don't give up for 2 years. If after 2 years you can't do it, then we can say you are ma'adhur, that you have an issue and your daad is unreachable. But otherwise, this is how much practice you have to put in. If you do the tongue exercise, I believe you can accelerate that tenfold. Last thing is, anyone from Bangladesh will say, so what's all of that hassle in Bangladesh about? So that's complicated, and it's got very little to do with academic discussions relating to daad. It's more of a political thing.
There's been wars on this, isn't it?
Yes. Jazakumullahu khairan. Any questions?
Are we going to practice this when we come back?
Inshallah. Any questions?
Next holiday.
Shaykh, any questions?
Nope, that's it, Shaykh. Jazakallah.